Thank you. First of all, thank you, Maylin, for inviting me. It's a real honor to be here. One of the credos of the early internet was be liberal in what you receive and conservative in what you send. So I will try to be brief, but forgive me if I ramble on because the story of how TCP/IP came to Singapore is really a story of many, many unsung heroes. And I'd like to take the opportunity to actually, record our thanks to a number of these individuals. But yeah, be liberal in what you receive. Well, I was fortunate to be a graduate student in the early 80s in upstate New York. And soaking up all this wonderful knowledge, we are here to celebrate actually this paper, A Protocol for Packet Network Interconnection, 1974. I hope, Vint, you will autograph this for me later. The story really is, I think, we owe a lot to the universities in the US and some of the visionaries. And secondly, to the vendors. For places like Singapore and parts of Asia that were never part of the earlier ARPANET, it was a much longer time frame. We were building prototypes when you had finished your prototypes. So let me begin. I think one of the visionaries that I really admired was actually Bill Joy at the UC Berkeley. As a graduate student, I don't know how many people remember staring at the TCP/IP source code on a VAX computer running BSD 4.2. Pretty much hasn't changed, but that was, and Bill Joy went on to actually start Sun Microsystems. How do we get TCP/IP in Singapore? Well, I happened to be lucky at the right place at the right time. I happened to be the first buyer of Sun workstations in Singapore in 1986. And you know what? Ethernet TCP/IP came for free, bundled in. So we stumbled on it, we got it. But back then, again, going back to my university days at RPI, I was fortunate to actually work on the VAX and look at all this wonderful code. And I'd like to also highlight that aside from the work done on the West Coast, some other work that was very critical and indispensable to our success when I went back to Singapore and we built some of the early IP networks was actually work done out of MIT. There was a package called PCIP. I don't know how many people remember that. John Romkey wrote the PCIP code. And I had the pleasure of actually working with that code on some of our projects. And when we were building our networks in Singapore, I went back to work for the Defense Ministry of Defense in Singapore. We built some of the early networks. We had so many islands of automation, and they were all just disconnected. There was a lot of data that needed to be connected. We had the VAXs. We had the big IBM mainframe with MVS. We had a whole bunch of IBM PCs. And we had also purchased a super mini computer, it was called at the time, that Gene Amdahl had built. I don't know how many people remember the Alexi Super Mini. So in that 1 year, 1986, we actually had to network all of that together. And I have to single out the vendors. Does anyone remember the Wollongong group? The Wollongong group. I mean, we had those VAX VMS computers, and none of the vendors, none of the hardware guys had enough faith in TCP/IP at that time that there was no native TCP/IP in any of the operating systems, with the exception of Sun Microsystems. So, well, we had a great relationship with Wollongong. We brought their software into Singapore, and we did some great things with it. Again, I think, oh, am I rambling on? I knew I'd be thrown off the stage. You know, you can't talk about TCP without talking about IP and gateways. And the first routers that we bought in Singapore were actually built by that lady over there, Judy Estrin, thank you very much. Bridge Communications. And I also want to mention, I had the pleasure of spending 7 years at this company, Proteon. And we actually had a guy called Noel Chiappa who had worked at MIT. And he wrote something called CGW. I don't know how many people were on the CGW mailing list. Show of hands? The Portable C Gateway. So, okay, I'm being kicked out, but thank you very much for your indulgence.